so for those who may not recognize this project or may have never seen this thing before yet, this is what I call the two-stroke triple yard cart project. Now we're going to be taking the engine out of this project to see if it'll fit in this one. And I know it's a bit unfortunate to be stripping this thing for parts, but honestly, I never knew what to do with this thing. I never knew where to take this, where I could safely test drive this thing and see how fast this thing is. So the first video that I filmed of test driving this thing for the first time did really well, which is awesome. And after that, I really wanted to test the top speed of this thing, drive around a lot more, but I could just never figure out where to take this thing where I could safely do that. This project, I want to say, is the fastest thing I have ever built. This actually has one of my custom-made two-speed transmissions, and I actually never really got to drive this thing in second gear because of how fast it was in first gear. I was hitting probably 65 miles an hour, not even half throttle in first gear, so I almost want to say this thing will easily hit over 100 miles an hour. And I really wanted to find a place where I can, take this thing 100 miles an hour, but for a little bit, I was thinking about taking this thing to the drag strip, but I decided against it because the brakes on this thing are horrid. They either just lock up the rear axle and you just slide forever, or they heat up really fast and has really bad brake fitting issues. Ideally, this thing really needs front brakes. And I was kind of really wanting to put front brakes on this thing, but I just never got around to it. So this product is definitely not very safe. So actually, a couple years ago, I did take this thing to Durham Town to try to drive this thing on the drag strip. But the drag strip on that day was so bumpy that it was just basically just hopping down the drag strip the whole way, so that really didn't work.
Yeah, that thing's got no suspension to it. Literally, the whole thing was hopping.
So yeah, I don't know what to do with this thing. It's terrifyingly fast. The brakes are horrible. Steering's not that great. So, and I mainly kind of just built this thing just to kind of see what this engine's capable of. So let's put this engine in something that's a little safer and a little better. So let's strip this thing for parts and see if this engine will fit in this project. Let's see how much coolant we can spill on the floor. Wow. Yeah, this engine is kind of heavy. Well, I mean, ooh, there we go. Actually, it kind of fits. There's a tiny bit more room for it to come down. Yeah, how in the world am I gonna get this thing to fit in here? Yeah, this is why I was really trying to find a 2-cylinder snowmobile engine, because this one barely fits in here. I do need to move it further forward, but I kind of can't because this tubing narrows at the top. And right now the CVT is almost touching this side. I mean, I can kind of move it a tiny bit further forward and over, but not enough. Now, I know I said that in one of the last videos of this project that this project isn't going to be chain drive, but I'm looking at this, and pretty much the only way to get this engine to work in this setup is we have to have a jackshaft. There's no way I can find... I've been looking on Google, I cannot find a belt long enough to reach all the way from here to here. This is an 1 3/8 wide belt, and I would need like a 65 or a 70-inch long belt, and I cannot find them. I can find some that are that long, but they're not the width that I need. They're a lot smaller. So pretty much the only way I can get this to work is with a jackshaft. I mean, it's either that or just, you know, getting a different end. I have been looking more on Facebook Marketplace. I did find an 800cc 2-cylinder snowmobile engine, which would be awesome for this project, but it's in Ohio. Yeah, do I want to drive it? I think that's like a 9 or 10 hour drive to Ohio to go pick that up. Do I have time for that right now? Not really. And it's $1,700. So let's see if we can get this engine to work in here. Let me move it around a little bit, see if I can get it to, I don't know, maybe if I lower it, I can get it to move a little bit further forward, or I could, you know, adjust where this tubing is, and just, you know, let me try to see if I can scoot this thing a little bit further forward. So this actually fits. Now that I lowered it a little bit, it actually fits a little bit better. I can actually move it like all the way back to here. I do need to make sure that the suspension can still move all the way up. We actually need to turn these aluminum mounts. We actually need to turn them around. So now that I lowered this, it actually, the primary can actually fit underneath this tubing, which is awesome. So yeah, trying to get everything to fit in here is definitely a challenge. So now, part of me, now that I know that this engine can kind of fit underneath the tubing and it can move forward, I was thinking about what if I move the shocks somewhere else and see if the belt that we have is long enough to maybe if we can move the engine far enough forward. All we have to do is extend the secondary pulley out, and then we don't have to do a jack shaft. But then the issue with that is the expansion chamber would be all the way up to here, which is way past where the seat needs to go. So that's not going to work. And I don't really want to mess around with the expansion chamber. So pretty much the only way to do this is a jack shaft. I mean, it's really, there's no other way around this. So now that we know that this engine kind of fits a little bit better in here, now that I lowered it a tiny, let's finalize the shocks. So therefore we can figure out where the top of the suspension is. Therefore we can make sure wherever we mount this engine, the suspension's not going to be hitting the bottom of the engine when the suspension goes all the way up. So let's remove this engine for a little bit, finalize the shocks, and then we can mount the engine. Oh, this engine is not light. Even without the spring, this is man, this is pretty strong. Oh. Alright, so that is its full range of suspension travel, which is not much, but I'll take it. Yeah, that's not much. So, after many hours, I finally got the engine mounted in the frame. Now, not only was I having issues making sure that the engine is not going to be in the way of the shocks, but also I was making sure that the expansion chamber is not going to be in the way of the seat, and also making sure that the carburetors and air filters have enough space behind here and underneath the fiberglass. Now, I did want to move this engine a little bit further forward, but I kind of couldn't because of the expansion chamber. It just sticks out so far past this engine, and right now the seat pretty much has to go right against this. So I may have to have a heat shield between the expansion chamber and the seat to make sure the seat doesn't melt. Now, the issues with the CVT on this, with the primary and secondary right now, not only are they not aligned, they're off by about 4 inches, but they're just spaced way too far apart. I cannot find a belt long enough, so pretty much the only way to get this setup to work is we have to have a jack shaft, so therefore I can get the primary and secondary aligned properly, and then I'll connect the jack shaft and the input of the gearbox with chains and sprockets. Now, I know one of the last videos of this project I said that this project isn't going to be chain drive because for some reason there's some of you guys in the comments that really make it clear that you guys really don't like chain drive and you would and you want me to build something that isn't chain drive. Well, I thought this was going to be the project, but unfortunately there's kind of no way around this. To get this setup to work with how compact this setup is, we're going to have to use a jack shaft, which means there's going to have to be just a little bit of chain drive. So yeah, let's figure out where the jack shaft needs to go and then figure out how we're mounting it in the frame. Alright, so this part of the gearbox, I don't need it and it's in the way, so let me cut this off. Alright, so the jack shaft is done. Now, next thing we need to do is obviously we need to mount sprockets here and down here. Now, I'm using 520 sprockets. I think those are good enough. I think 530 would be a little overkill, so I think these will be fine. Now, obviously, we do need to make sure that the sprockets are aligned perfectly, so I'm going to do this one first, so therefore I can figure out where exactly that needs to be, and then I can make sure that the bottom one is aligned with the top one. Also, I did make it to where we can adjust the jack shaft back and forward to adjust the tension of the belt, but also how we're going to be adjusting the tension of the chain is I can simply just put washers underneath the pillow block bearings to lift it up, and that's how we're going to be adjusting the chain. So it is adjustable up and down and back and forward. So this kind of took us the entire video just to get the engine installed and get the jackshaft installed, but this was kind of really complicated. Plus I took a couple days trying to see if I could figure out a different engine for this project. I am glad that I did not choose to go with the 2-cylinder 550 snowmobile engine, the one in Georgia. I'm glad I didn't do that because you never want less horsepower, you always want more horsepower. And as awesome as it would have been driving to Ohio to go pick up that 800cc 2-cylinder snowmobile engine, as awesome as that would have been, I just did not have grace to drive 9 hours one way to Ohio and 9 hours back. I did not have time this week, as well as I'm looking at the expansion chamber and it's even longer, so I'm not really sure how that would have worked. So this one works fine, it fits in here. And we have the jackshaft installed. Now here's the thing with the jackshaft is the gearing between the jackshaft and the input of the gearbox is actually not 1-to-1. I made it to where the sprocket on the jackshaft is a 20-tooth sprocket, and the sprocket on the input is a 19-tooth sprocket. So therefore, it's overdriven by a little bit. Now the reason I did that is because when I first built this thing and first pulled out this gearbox, I measured the gearing between the input and the output to the tires and measured it relative to the gearing between the input on the secondary pulley of the CVT to the tires and on the Mini Baja Bug project. I wish I wrote this down because I don't really remember the exact numbers, but on the Mini Baja Bug project, I want to say it's like 3.5, almost 4-to-1, but with this project, it is, I think, 6.5 or 7-to-1 in high range. So this vehicle is not going to be as fast as the Mini Baja Bug project. So that's why I did want to overdrive the input just a tiny little bit to get it a little bit faster. And we can always, if we want to, this is the nice thing about chain drive, we can always play around with the gearing later on if we want to. If we want to make this thing faster, we can. And if we gear it too much and it's too fast, we always have low range. So that's not an issue. But now, next video of this project, I really want to get the drive shafts installed going from this gearbox up to the front differential. I do need to get a front differential rebuild kit because the oil seals on that are leaking. And I really want to get the seat installed and start figuring out the front steering, getting the front suspension finalized. Also, I really want to get the fiberglass body put back on this thing I really want to see what this thing looks like with the tires installed. And we're definitely going to have to cut out the wheel well, the fenders, whatever they're called, in the fiberglass body to make sure the tires fit and everything. Now, I know I kept saying in the last couple videos of this project that I really wanted to make it to where the tires are in the fiberglass body, but that did not work out because the CV axles, I would have had to shorten them by a lot, and I decided not to do that just because that just adds further complications. So these tires are going to be sticking out a lot past the fiberglass body, so we may not have to trim that much. Definitely going to have to trim a little bit. But anyway, guess that's it for this video. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.